The wedding portrait sat framed on the mantelpiece, a perfect tableau of matrimonial bliss. Sunlight, eternally captured, streamed through an arched window, illuminating Lena and James, their smiles radiant, their eyes locked in what appeared to be unadulterated adoration. It was the kind of photograph that bespoke fairy tales, a frozen moment of absolute, unquestionable happiness. For months, it had been a comforting anchor in their new home, a silent testament to their whirlwind romance and the dream life Lena felt she had finally found. Lena, with her effortless grace and a spirit as bright as the morning sun, had always envisioned a life of serene beauty, and with James, it seemed she had found it. He was everything she had ever dreamed of: kind, handsome, and utterly devoted. Their small town, nestled beside a whispering river and surrounded by rolling hills, was the epitome of peaceful existence. Days blurred into a gentle rhythm of shared laughter, quiet evenings by the fireplace, and the comforting predictability of newlywed domesticity. Every morning Lena would glance at the portrait, a warm glow spreading through her chest, confirming that her perfect world was very real. One ordinary Tuesday afternoon, a seemingly innocuous detail shattered that illusion. Lena was dusting, a mundane chore transformed into a meditative act in her idyllic life, when her gaze lingered on the framed photograph. The late afternoon light, perhaps casting a different angle than usual, seemed to sharpen a tiny, almost imperceptible nuance in the image. Her left hand, resting delicately in James's larger one, suddenly seemed off. She leaned closer, her brow furrowing slightly, dismissing it initially as a trick of the light, a smudge on the glass, or perhaps just a quirk of the photographic development. But the more she stared, the more a cold tendril of unease began to snake its way through her. The hand wasn't merely odd, it was subtly, unnaturally curved. The fingers, particularly her ring finger, seemed to bend at an angle that defied natural anatomy, and beneath the soft, romantic filter that coated the entire image, there was a faint, almost imperceptible discoloration, a bruised shadow clinging to the base of her thumb. It was so subtle, so easily overlooked, that she marveled at how she had never noticed it before. How could something so fundamentally wrong have gone unnoticed in countless inspections of her most cherished memory? The warmth that the portrait usually evoked was replaced by a chill. This wasn't just a trick of the light, it felt like a silent scream trapped within the frame. Her own hand, the very one in the photograph, felt perfectly normal now as she flexed her fingers, examining her skin. No unusual curves, no strange marks. Yet the image persisted, a disturbing anomaly that defied explanation. The joyous expression on her face in the photo suddenly felt like a mask, hiding something deeply unsettling beneath its surface. The perfect world she had built, the one she admired daily on her mantelpiece, seemed to wobble on its axis. Lena picked up the frame, turning it over in her hands, as if to find an answer etched on the back. But there was nothing, just the smooth wood and the tiny metal clasps holding the photograph in place. She held it closer to the window, hoping the bright sunshine would reveal a simpler explanation, a dust speck, a pixelation error. Instead, the brighter light seemed to accentuate the strangeness, highlighting the peculiar bend, the faint, discolored patch. It was undeniably there, an unwelcome guest in her perfect memory. Her heart, which moments ago had been beating with the gentle rhythm of contentment, now thrummed with a low, insistent anxiety. What was this? A flaw in the photography? A bizarre shadow? Or something far more sinister, something that had been staring back at her for months, silently mocking her oblivious happiness? The piece of her picturesque home, of her seemingly unblemished marriage, seemed to crack, revealing a sliver of darkness she hadn't known existed. The dream, once so vivid and real, suddenly felt fragile, threatened by this one tiny yet profoundly jarring detail. This isn't just a wedding photo anymore, it's a riddle, a whispered secret hidden in plain sight. Every perfect smile, every loving glance in that picture now holds a haunting question. What does that subtle imperfection on Lena's hand truly mean, and how could such a thing go unnoticed in a day meant to be flawless? Join us as we peel back the layers of this beautiful, yet deeply unsettling mystery. Don't miss a single chilling detail as Lena delves deeper into what might be a truth far darker than she could ever imagine. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can uncover this unfolding mystery right alongside us, frame by agonizing frame. What begins as a whisper in a photograph might just become a roar that changes everything. The radiant smile Lena wore on her wedding day, captured so perfectly in that cherished portrait, now felt like a cruel deception. Each time her eyes fell upon the photograph, a cold sliver of unease would creep into her heart, starting from the faint, almost imperceptible anomaly on her left hand. It was a subtle twist, a bizarre discoloration that seemed to ripple beneath the skin, defying the pristine innocence of the moment. Initially, she dismissed it, coaxing her mind to believe it was merely a trick of the light, a quirky photographic artifact, or perhaps even a smudge on the glossy surface. She'd tried to scrub at it, to wipe away the offending distortion, only for the realization to dawn on her that the mark was in the photo, not on it. The image, once a beacon of her newfound happiness with James, began to haunt her quiet moments. It lay on her nightstand, a constant, unsettling presence. During the day, it would surface unbidden in her thoughts, a dissonant note in the symphony of her idyllic life. The more she tried to ignore it, the more insistent its silent demand for attention became. It was an itch she couldn't scratch, a whisper she couldn't quite decipher, but one that resonated with an increasingly ominous tone. One afternoon, over steaming cups of Earl Grey, Lena finally plucked up the courage to show the photograph to Sarah, her closest confidant and maid of honor. Sarah, ever practical and grounded, held the portrait at arm's length, her brow furrowing slightly as she scanned the image. "Oh, that's odd," she mused, her voice trailing off. "Is it just the way the light caught your hand? Or maybe a bad print?" Lena explained her growing fixation, the nagging feeling that it was more than just a superficial flaw. Sarah, however, remained unconvinced. "Honestly, Lena, it looks like artistic license to me. Photographers do weird things with shadows and filters to create mood. You're probably just overthinking it. You know how you get." Her friend's casual dismissal, though well-intentioned, only amplified Lena's isolation in her burgeoning suspicion. The subtle, almost invisible nature of the anomaly itself became a psychological antagonist, making her question her sanity, making her wonder if she was imagining things, grasping at straws where there was nothing but air. Lena's journey into the rabbit hole of doubt began in earnest. Her first logical step was to compare the print with other copies of the wedding photos. She remembered receiving a small album from the photographer, containing several proofs. With trembling hands, she dug through a box in the study, finally unearthing the album. Page after page, she flipped through them, her heart sinking with each photograph she scrutinized. There it was again, on every single image where her left hand was visible. That peculiar curvature, that faint discoloration, sometimes more pronounced, sometimes barely discernible, but undeniably present. It wasn't a singular printing error, it was consistently replicated across all copies, a pervasive, unsettling detail that transcended mere coincidence. A cold dread began to settle in her stomach. Her initial attempts at resolution had only deepened the mystery, painting it with strokes of the surreal. If it wasn't a trick of light or a printing error, then what was it? Driven by a desperate need for answers, Lena turned to the boundless expanse of the internet. Late into the nights, long after James had fallen asleep beside her, she would sit hunched over her laptop, the screen illuminating her worried face. She typed in every keyword she could think of: photography glitches wedding, anomalies in prints, optical illusions hands, strange discolorations in photos. She scrolled through countless forums, photography blogs, and scientific articles dealing with visual perception. She found discussions about lens flares, digital artifacts, motion blur, and even bizarre instances of ghosting in old photographs. But none of it, absolutely none of it, resonated with what she was seeing in her own wedding portrait. The explanations offered online were either too generic or too fantastical, failing to provide any satisfactory answer for the specific unsettling detail on her hand. It wasn't a blurry smear nor a sudden pixelation. It was too organic, too anatomical. The more she searched, the more frustrated and disheartened she became. Each dead end served to further isolate her, cementing the gnawing suspicion that this was not a common photographic phenomenon. The internet, usually a trove of information, proved to be an echo chamber of unrelated theories, none of which shed light on her particular predicament. It felt like she was looking for a needle in a haystack, but the haystack itself was made of intangible doubts and unspoken fears. The anomaly in the photograph seemed to mock her, a silent challenge daring her to uncover its truth. Her logical mind, once so confident, was now adrift in a sea of questions, each wave pulling her further from the shore of normalcy. What exactly was captured in that seemingly perfect moment, and why did it feel so wrong? The pleasant illusion of her perfect life was beginning to fray at the edges, revealing glimpses of a darker, more intricate tapestry beneath. The photograph, once a symbol of her perfect union, had become an insidious obsession, drawing Lena into a labyrinth of digital rabbit holes. Every evening after James had settled into his study, she would retreat to her own, the soft glow of her laptop screen illuminating her increasingly strained features. She scoured obscure photography forums, desperate for a technical explanation that would dissolve the chilling anomaly on her hand. She posted anonymous queries, describing the unnerving curvature, the subtle discoloration, the way her fingers seemed to defy anatomical expectation in that single framed moment. The responses were a frustrating mix of the unhelpful and the dismissive. Bad lighting, one user suggested, attaching a link to an article about photographic chromatic aberration. Probably just a shadow from the bouquet, offered another, followed by an emoji of a shrug. A few suggested lens flare, a distortion of perspective, or even a trick of the eye, all explanations Lena had already considered and rejected. Each dead-end post, each flippant answer chipped away at her resolve, replacing it with a gnawing sense of isolation. No one else seemed to see it with the same clarity she did. No one else felt the chilling dread that accompanied the image. The world, it seemed, was content to accept the surface, while she was trapped beneath it, drowning in unanswered questions. This lack of external validation only intensified Lena's internal turmoil. She found herself scrutinizing James with an unnerving new focus. His easy laugh suddenly seemed a performance. His attentive gaze felt calculating. His calm demeanor, once so comforting, now radiated an almost unsettling serenity. He was too composed, she thought, too unruffled by the small, everyday stresses that would fluster anyone else. He had a habit of leaving his phone face down, a detail she'd never noticed before, but which now screamed of hidden secrets. He'd often disappear into his study for hours, claiming to be working on complex financial models, but a new, cold voice in Lena's mind whispered of clandestine activities. The way he sometimes watched her, a fleeting, almost imperceptible intensity in his eyes, sent shivers down her spine. Was it love, or was it something else? She found herself holding her breath when he entered a room, cataloging his movements, searching for any telltale sign that might confirm her burgeoning, terrifying suspicions. Her once robust sleep had fractured into fitful hours, haunted by distorted images of her own hand, twisted and alien. Then came Mr. Henderson. Lena had stumbled upon his dusty little photography studio on a whim, a desperate last resort after countless fruitless hours online. The shop, nestled between a laundromat and a defunct bookstore, smelled of old chemicals and fading memories. Mr. Henderson, a man whose wispy white hair seemed to defy gravity and whose spectacles perched precariously on the end of his nose, looked as though he had stepped out of an earlier century. He greeted her with a warm, if slightly eccentric smile. "Just a print, dear?" he'd asked, his voice raspy with age and disuse. "No, actually," Lena began, her voice trembling slightly as she handed him the framed wedding portrait. I have a question about this, about my hand." Mr. Henderson took the photograph, his eyes magnified by his thick lenses, narrowing slightly as he peered at it. He carried it over to a large illuminated workbench, pulling out a jeweler's loupe. For a long moment he was silent, his breath whistling softly. Lena watched him, her heart hammering against her ribs, a fragile hope blossoming within her. He turned the photo, angling it under the light, his fingers tracing the faint lines of her dress, then lingering on her left hand. He didn't dismiss it, didn't offer a platitude. Instead, his brow furrowed, a thoughtful frown deepening the wrinkles on his forehead. He finally murmured, a sound that was less a question and more a statement of profound curiosity. "Interesting, very interesting indeed." He adjusted his loupe, leaning closer until his nose almost touched the glass. "Most folks, they see what they want to see in a wedding photo, don't they? Love, joy, new beginnings. But you see something else, don't you?" He looked up at her, a knowing glint in his eyes. "And I dare say you're not wrong." Lena felt a wave of relief so intense it almost made her dizzy. Someone finally saw it. "What is it?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Mr. Henderson returned to his meticulous examination. At first glance, it appears to be a slight distortion, perhaps a minor focusing error, but he trailed off, his finger now hovering inches above the image of her hand. The light, the shadow, it's all quite consistent with the rest of the photograph, yet the curvature of your finger, the way the skin seems to pull, it's not quite right. Not a photographic error, I don't think. Not entirely. He paused, removing the loupe and rubbing his rheumy eyes. It's as if the hand itself is not quite right in that moment. As if it were subtly altered, perhaps under duress or by something else entirely. The camera, it merely captured what was there, my dear. And what was there was not entirely natural. It suggests a deeper, more physical anomaly rather than a trick of the lens. His words hung in the air, heavy with a new, terrifying implication. The distortion wasn't just an image, it was a reflection of a physical reality. Mr. Henderson, with a renewed sense of purpose, carefully set the framed photograph onto a larger, more sophisticated apparatus. It resembled an old-fashioned microscope, but instead of slides, it held illuminated photographic plates, projecting their magnified images onto a small, frosted screen. He meticulously adjusted a series of knobs and levers, his movements precise and deliberate, each click carrying the weight of Lena's burgeoning dread. The image of her hand, initially a tiny detail in the grand portrait, began to expand on the screen, growing larger and larger, pixel by pixel, until the individual pores of her skin became visible, then the faint lines of her fingerprint. Lena leaned in, her breath catching in her throat, her eyes fixed on the evolving magnification. The clarity was astonishing, almost painful in its detail. What had appeared as a subtle, unnatural curvature now sharpened into something far more unsettling. The skin, at the base of her ring finger, seemed to pucker inwards, almost like a tiny healed puncture wound, but without the typical scarring. And then, as Mr. Henderson zoomed in even further, adjusting the focus to an almost microscopic level, it became horrifyingly clear. Embedded just beneath the surface of her skin, a minuscule metallic glint became visible. It was impossibly small, a sliver, like a splinter of polished steel, yet unmistakably there. It wasn't a trick of light, not a photographic anomaly, not a birthmark, nor any natural imperfection. It was an object, tiny and foreign, nestled disturbingly within her flesh. Lena gasped, a soft, strangled sound that seemed to echo in the quiet studio. Her hand, the one in the portrait, the one she now instinctively brought up to examine, felt suddenly alien, violated. A cold shiver traced its way up her spine, coalescing into an icy knot in her stomach. The perfect image of her wedding day, so lovingly captured, was not merely shattered, it was utterly desecrated. The joy, the dreamlike quality, the innocent happiness she remembered feeling, all twisted into a grotesque mockery. Every memory of that day, every smile, every shared glance with James now felt tainted, poisoned by this insidious, hidden reality. A wave of nausea washed over her. She stumbled back from the screen, her legs suddenly weak, the ground beneath her feeling like quicksand. Betrayal, sharp and bitter, rose in her throat. Not just by an unknown force, but by the very man she had pledged her life to. James, how could he? How could this have happened without her knowing? The thought was a relentless hammer blow to her nascent hope. The man who had vowed to protect her, to cherish her, had somehow inconceivably allowed this, or worse, orchestrated it. The implications were too vast, too terrifying to comprehend fully, yet they screamed at her from every corner of her mind. A profound sense of isolation descended upon her. Who could she trust? Her friends had dismissed her concerns. Her own senses had failed her. And now, the man she loved, her husband, was the most terrifying suspect of all. The weight of this secret, this horrifying discovery, threatened to crush her. She felt like a character in a waking nightmare where the familiar world slowly revealed its monstrous underbelly. Mr. Henderson, noticing her distress, gently placed a hand on her arm. His touch, though light, startled her. She looked up, her eyes wide and brimming with unshed tears. "My dear," he said, his voice softer now, laced with genuine concern, "this is a very grave matter indeed. I have seen many strange things in my line of work, but nothing quite like this. That is no natural occurrence." He pointed back to the screen, to the microscopic glint. "It looks like a fragment, perhaps surgically embedded, or, God forbid, forced." The word forced reverberated through Lena's mind, chilling her to the bone. Force implies intent, a deliberate act of malice. Her beautiful wedding, her beautiful husband, her beautiful new life. All of it now felt like a carefully constructed illusion, a gilded cage designed to ensnare her. The dread intensified, evolving beyond mere fear into a cold, calculated terror. She pictured James's face, his reassuring smile, his tender touch. Everything he had ever said or done for her now replayed in her mind, filtered through this new, terrifying lens. Were his kindnesses just a part of the act? Was his love a lie? She needed answers, but a direct confrontation felt impossibly dangerous. How could she approach him without revealing the depth of her suspicion? What if he was truly capable of such a thing? The thought of his reaction, should he realize she knew, sent a fresh wave of panic through her. She imagined his calm demeanor shifting, his eyes hardening, perhaps even a flash of something sinister hidden behind his usual warmth. The man she married and the potential monster now coexisted in her mind, creating an unbearable cognitive dissonance. Lena found herself mentally rehearsing scenarios, crafting questions that sounded innocent, that wouldn't tip her hand too soon. She needed to be subtle, cunning. She needed to understand the why, the how, and the extent of this deception before making any rash moves. The image of the tiny metallic object under her skin burned in her mind, a constant, horrifying reminder of the silent battle she now faced. She had to gather more information, but carefully, meticulously, like a detective unraveling a complex, deeply personal crime. The game had changed. This was no longer about a strange photograph. It was about her life, her body, and the truth hidden beneath the surface of her perfect marriage. The confrontation was inevitable, but she needed to be prepared, armed with more than just a vague suspicion. She needed actual evidence, proof that wasn't just a microscopic glint in an old photograph. The thought filled her with a grim determination. The photographer's words echoed in Lena's mind long after she left his dusty shop. Not a photographic error, not entirely. A deeper, more physical anomaly. The implication was a cold, hard knot in her stomach. It wasn't the camera playing tricks, it was her hand, her own body, that harbored this strange, unsettling truth. The perfect wedding portrait, once a symbol of her new life, now felt like a terrifying exhibit, showcasing a secret she hadn't even known she possessed. She had to confront James. The thought churned her insides, fear warring with a desperate need for answers. How could she approach him without tipping her hand, without revealing the depth of her suspicion? She practiced scenarios in her head, trying to find a balance between casual curiosity and pointed inquiry. That evening, the house felt different, imbued with a new tension, a silent accusation. James was in the living room, absorbed in a documentary about ancient civilizations, his gaze fixed on the screen. The flickering light cast dancing shadows across his face, making him seem both familiar and utterly alien. Lena took a deep breath, clutching the framed wedding portrait in her hands. Her palms were clammy. She walked into the room, trying to project an air of nonchalance she absolutely did not feel. "Hey," she said, her voice a little too bright. "Look what I found tucked away in the attic, our wedding portrait." She held it up, watching him closely. James turned, a slow smile spreading across his lips. "Ah, the big day. Seems like yesterday, doesn't it?" His eyes scanned the photograph, lingering for a moment on her face, then on his own. He didn't immediately focus on her hand. Lena's heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "It really does," she agreed, trying to match his easy tone. She moved closer, setting the frame on the coffee table between them. She pointed with a casual flick of her wrist. "You know, it's funny though, I just noticed something odd now that I'm really looking at it." She traced a finger around the image of her left hand. "Does my hand look a little off to you here? Just that one finger, the way it bends." James leaned in, peering at the photograph, his brow furrowed almost imperceptibly, a fleeting expression that Lena almost missed. Then his face smoothed out, and he gave a soft chuckle, a sound that grated on her nerves. "Off? What do you mean, darling? It just looks like your hand." "Probably just the angle or maybe the depth of field from the photographer. You know how those things can play tricks with perception." He picked up the frame, turning it slightly, then placed it back down with an almost imperceptible nudge, subtly altering its position. "Or maybe," he continued, his tone light, "you were just a little nervous, clenching your fist too tightly. Big day after all." His explanation was plausible, maddeningly so. Too plausible. It was the kind of dismissive response she'd gotten from her friends, from the online forums, but coming from James, it felt different. It felt rehearsed. His calmness was unsettling, a stark contrast to the churning anxiety in her own chest. There was no surprise, no real curiosity, just a perfectly reasonable, utterly unsatisfying answer. It didn't explain the quirky photographer's detailed analysis, the way Mr. Henderson had hinted at a physical anomaly. Lena forced a smile. "Maybe you're right. Just my imagination." She picked up the photo, cradling it. She wanted to scream, to demand he look closer, to truly see it. But she couldn't. Not yet. She needed more. His placid demeanor, the practiced ease with which he dismissed her observation, only solidified her resolve. James was hiding something. The question was, what? Over the next few days, Lena started observing James with a new clinical detachment. She watched him, not as her loving husband, but as a subject under intense scrutiny. She noticed the small things, the almost imperceptible shifts in his routine she'd always attributed to work stress or just individual quirks. Now, they felt sinister. He spent more time than usual in his study, the door often locked. Before, she'd respected his need for privacy. Now it felt like a deliberate exclusion. She found herself straining to hear snippets of conversation when he was on the phone, his voice often hushed, his words indistinct. He had always been a private person, she reminded herself, but now that privacy felt like a carefully constructed wall. One morning while James was in the shower, Lena found herself drawn to his study. The door, usually locked, was ajar. A sliver of light escaped, beckoning her. Her heart hammered, a mix of guilt and desperate curiosity propelling her forward. She slipped inside, the room instantly feeling colder, more austere than she remembered. Stacked on his desk beneath a pile of seemingly innocuous financial documents, she spotted a small, dark, leather-bound journal. It looked old, worn, unlike anything James usually kept. Her breath hitched. This wasn't right. It felt alien, out of place, in his meticulously organized world. Her fingers trembled as she reached for it. The leather was smooth, cool beneath her touch. A faint metallic scent, almost like old blood or something chemical, emanated from it. She knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that this was what she had been looking for. This was the opening. But before she could even contemplate opening it, she heard the shower turn off. Panic flared, sharp and instantaneous. She quickly pushed the journal back under the papers, trying to make it look undisturbed, then scurried out of the study, pulling the door almost shut behind her. Her heart was still racing, her ears straining for any sound that would indicate James had noticed her intrusion. He hadn't. Not yet. But the encounter left her shaken, a new, alarming piece of his hidden life exposed, however briefly. She couldn't confront him again, not without more proof. His dismissive nonchalance about the photograph had taught her that. She needed an ally, someone outside their immediate circle who wouldn't be swayed by James's charm, someone who might know something or could help her understand what she was truly up against. Her mind drifted to James's past, a past he rarely spoke about, a past that always felt a little too vague when she pressed for details. He'd mentioned growing up in a small, isolated community, but always deflected when she asked for specifics. She needed to find someone from that past, someone who knew the real James before she became Mrs. Lena Hayes. That journal, she was certain, held deeper secrets, but she couldn't risk exploring it now. For now, the external search had to begin. She felt a cold dread settle over her, the realization that she might be married to a stranger, a man capable of hiding a monstrous truth. The physical reality Mr. Henderson alluded to gnawed at Lena, a persistent, icy dread that settled deep within her bones. His pronouncement had been a stark validation of her fears, stripping away the last vestiges of self-doubt. The quirky old photographer's words echoed in her mind. Not entirely natural. It wasn't a trick of light, not a faulty lens, but something fundamentally, disturbingly wrong with her own hand as captured on that supposedly joyous day. The revelation had propelled her into a new, more desperate phase of her investigation, one that demanded secrecy and cunning. James, with his controlled demeanor and subtly deflecting answers, now seemed a stranger, a perfectly sculpted facade concealing an abyss. She had to find answers, and she had to find them without him knowing. Her first covert steps were small, almost imperceptible. She began by observing James with an intensity she hadn't known she possessed, scrutinizing his habits, his expressions, the way he moved. The inconsistencies she had previously dismissed as marital quirks now stood out in stark relief. His infrequent, often vague phone calls, always taken in another room, or his late-night work sessions that yielded no tangible results she could discern. She started cataloging these oddities in her mind, a silent internal ledger of suspicion. One particularly chilly evening, while James was supposedly working late at his office, a story she now heavily doubted, Lena found herself drawn to his study. It was a space he guarded with an almost religious fervor, always locked, always tidy. Her heart pounded against her ribs like a trapped bird, but the urgency of her quest pushed her past the pangs of guilt. She remembered seeing him stash a spare key once, in a small, ornate wooden box on his dresser, usually hidden beneath a pile of cufflinks. Her fingers trembled as she retrieved it, the cold metal a stark contrast to the burning intensity of her resolve. The lock on the study door clicked with an unnervingly loud finality in the quiet house. Inside, the room was precisely as he always left it, meticulously organized, almost sterile. Nothing seemed out of place. Disappointment threatened to overwhelm her, but something deep inside urged her to look closer, to trust her intuition. She scanned the bookshelves, running her fingers over the spines of books on finance and international law, subjects she knew he dabbled in for his consultancy work. Then, almost hidden behind a particularly dense tome on corporate mergers, she spotted it. A small leather-bound journal, its cover worn and unmarked. With bated breath, she pulled it out. It wasn't a diary in the traditional sense, but a series of cryptic entries, dates followed by strange symbols and abbreviations. Her knowledge of medical terminology was limited, but certain words jumped out at her: transduction, neural interface, symbiotic integration. And then a diagram. A crude but disturbingly familiar drawing of a human hand, with detailed annotations pointing to the metacarpal bones, the phalanges, and a faint, almost invisible circle near the base of the ring finger. Her ring finger, the very one in the photograph. Beneath the diagram, in James's distinctive, precise handwriting, was a line of text that chilled her to the core. Subject L. Integration successful. Phase 1 complete. Lena felt the blood drain from her face, her hands shaking so violently she almost dropped the journal. Subject L. Lena. The implications crashed down upon her with the force of a tidal wave. The mark on her hand wasn't just an alteration, a distortion, or a consequence of duress. It was an intentional, carefully orchestrated act. The words, the diagrams, they all pointed to something far more sinister than she could have ever imagined. Her hand, her very body, had been modified, integrated with something. A neural interface, symbiotic integration. These weren't terms of endearment or normal medical procedures. They sounded like something out of a dystopian nightmare. The journal revealed fragments of a terrifying design. It included dates that corresponded suspiciously with their engagement, with their wedding plans, and then, horrifically, with the wedding day itself, marked by an entry simply stating, "Deployment complete. Monitor for rejection." Rejection. The word sent a shiver of pure terror through her. What had he deployed? Into her? Was it a tracking device, as she had fleetingly feared, or something far more invasive, something that altered her very being? The journal hinted at manipulation, control, and a patient, methodical plan that spanned months, perhaps even years. It wasn't just her hand. It was a symbol, a physical manifestation of his insidious ownership. Her relationship with James, the man she had loved and married, dissolved in that instant, replaced by a searing betrayal and a cold, hard certainty. She was in grave danger. Every tender touch, every loving gaze, every shared laugh now felt like a carefully constructed lie designed to facilitate this horrifying endeavor. He wasn't her husband, he was her captor, her orchestrator. The journal's cryptic final entry in her segment read, Phase 2 awaits activation. Complete control imminent. Control. The word echoed in her mind, a chilling prophecy. The time for unraveling mysteries was over. The time for asking questions, for seeking understanding had passed. What she needed now was escape, a desperate, meticulously planned departure. She closed the journal, her mind racing with a frantic energy. Her perfect life was a cage, and James, her loving husband, held the key, or rather, he had implanted it within her. She had to sever that connection, had to disappear. Not a trace, not a sound. She would become a ghost, an echo of the woman James thought he controlled. Survival meant becoming invisible. It meant planning every single detail. It meant running and never, ever looking back. She carefully replaced the journal, locked the study door, and returned the key. Her face a mask of practiced calm now. Her heart a furious drumbeat of terror and resolve. Her escape plan, born of absolute necessity, began forming in the silent terror of her mind. The house lights flickered, a momentary tremor that sent a jolt through Lena. She had been meticulously laying out her escape route, tracing paths on a mental map of the town, calculating bus schedules, and mentally packing a small, inconspicuous bag with essentials. The sudden dip in power felt like an omen, a cosmic push for her to act now. She heard James's heavy footsteps on the stairs, a sound that previously signified comfort, now a harbinger of dread. He was coming up earlier than expected. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Her escape plan, still nascent, still fragile, had to accelerate. She moved with a newfound terrifying efficiency, grabbing the small backpack she had hidden beneath loose floorboards in her closet. Inside were her emergency cash, a burner phone she'd purchased weeks ago under a false name, and a change of clothes. No sentimental items, no photographs, nothing that could tie her to the life she was abandoning. Her hands trembled, but her mind was razor-sharp, focused solely on the next critical second. The footsteps paused just outside her bedroom door. Her breath hitched. "Lena, everything all right, darling?" Power surged just now. James's voice, superficially concerned, had an underlying edge she now recognized as possessive vigilance. He was testing the waters, probing for any deviation from her carefully constructed facade of normalcy. "Oh yes, just a bit of a startle," she called back, forcing a lightness into her tone that felt like a betrayal of her own terror. She quickly slid her feet into the worn sneakers she had chosen for their quiet soles. Power flickered, made me jump. Almost dropped my book. "Right, well, I'm heading to the study for a bit. Just some last-minute work before bed," he replied, his voice receding. The study. The place where his darkest secrets lay bare in that journal. He was going to check on it, she knew, a routine inspection of his meticulously constructed web. This was it. This was her window. She waited a heartbeat, then two, listening to the soft click of the study door closing. Now or never. She crept out of her room, every floorboard creaking a symphony of betrayal under her weight. The old house, once a sanctuary, was now a labyrinth of potential traps. She navigated the darkened hallway, her eyes scanning for any sign of movement, any shadow that might betray her presence. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her eardrums. She reached the back door, the one that led to the overgrown garden and a seldom-used alleyway. Just as her fingers brushed the cold metal of the doorknob, a voice, calm and deadly, sliced through the silence. "Leaving so soon, my dear?" Lena froze. James stood at the end of the hallway, illuminated by the faint glow filtering from the living room. He wasn't enraged, not yet. He was simply disappointed, and that was far more terrifying. His eyes, usually warm and affectionate, were now chillingly devoid of emotion, observing her with the clinical detachment of a scientist watching an experiment unfold. He held the journal in his hand, its leather cover a dark accusation. "I found your little travel journal, Lena," he continued, his voice soft, almost a whisper, yet it echoed with a terrifying finality. "Such lovely insights into your plans, so much detail about our integration." He took a step forward. "You misunderstand, my love. There is no leaving." A primal scream built in Lena's throat, but she swallowed it, transforming her fear into a desperate surge of adrenaline. She flung open the back door, not caring about the noise, and bolted into the night. The cool air hit her face, a brief taste of freedom. But James was faster than she anticipated. He moved with a swiftness that belied his intellectual demeanor, a predatory grace. He was behind her in an instant, his hand closing around her wrist, the one carrying the ominous mark. "You can't escape what's inside you," he hissed, his grip tightening. "It's part of you now. Part of us." His words, chillingly calm, hinted at the true insidious nature of the mark. It wasn't just a tracking device, it was an anchor, a fundamental link he had forged. The integration wasn't just physical, Lena. It was meant to bind us, to harmonize our wills. You were to be my perfect complement, my intellectual equal, enhanced by my vision. Lena struggled, her mind reeling from the revelation. Harmonize their wills? He hadn't just altered her hand. He had tried to alter her very essence, her autonomy. The mark wasn't ownership. It was an attempted erasure of her independent thought, a forced symbiosis. That explained the subtle shifts she'd felt, moments of strange compliance, fleeting thoughts that weren't quite her own. He wasn't just controlling her movements. He was trying to control her mind. This was a nightmare far deeper than she had imagined. Her vision blurred, a wave of dizziness washing over her, a direct result of his intensified grip on her marked hand. He was using it against her, activating whatever dark mechanism he had embedded. But precisely at that moment, a sudden, blinding flash erupted from the alleyway, followed by the screech of tires. A black sedan, its headlights like monstrous eyes, careened around the corner, its doors flying open. Two figures clad in dark tactical gear leaped out, their movements coordinated and precise. "James Thorne, this is the agency. Stand down." A resonant, authoritative voice boomed, cutting through the night. The unexpected arrival of an external force, an unforeseen variable, created a sliver of hope for Lena. James's eyes widened, his composure finally cracking. He had been so focused on his prey, on Lena, that he had utterly missed the hunters pursuing him. In that brief moment of distraction, the grip on her wrist faltered, loosened by a fraction. It was all Lena needed. With a desperate surge of strength, she twisted free, stumbled, and ran towards the approaching agents, a beacon of unexpected salvation. The mark on her hand burned, but for the first time it burned with defiance, not captivity. Lena's escape plan, meticulously crafted in the crucible of her newfound terror, hinged on precision and absolute silence. She moved like a phantom through the house she once called home, each step measured, each breath held. The night James was away on a supposed business trip, conveniently prolonged by an unexpected storm, became her window. She packed a small backpack with essentials, cash she had discreetly accumulated, a burner phone, and a change of clothes, items so innocuous they wouldn't raise suspicion if found. The mark on her hand, that chilling testament to James's insidious design, pulsed with a phantom ache, a constant visceral reminder of what she was fleeing, but it also fueled her resolve, hardening her spirit into an unyielding shield. She left no note, no trace of her intentions. A note would be an invitation for pursuit. Silence was her only ally. Her car, left deliberately low on gas weeks prior, was out of the question. Instead, she had researched bus routes, obscure lines that bypassed major terminals, blending her into the faceless stream of transient travelers. The local library, an unsuspecting hub of knowledge, and now her temporary sanctuary, had provided maps and schedules for destinations far beyond the familiar cityscape. She chose a small coastal town hundreds of miles away, a place she had never visited, a blank canvas where no one knew her, and where the rhythmic roar of the ocean might drown out the lingering echoes of her nightmare. The taxi she called, not from her home phone but from a prepaid burner, was instructed to wait several blocks away under the guise of an early morning flight. As she slipped out of the house into the pre-dawn chill, the grand facade of their shared life loomed dark and silent, a monument to a colossal deception. There was no hesitation, no backward glance. The woman who had believed in love, in James, had died the moment she read his journal. The woman walking away now was a survivor, stripped bare of illusions but forged anew in the fires of betrayal. Hours turned into endless stretches of highway, the drone of the bus engine a dull lullaby. Each mile widened the chasm between her and the person she used to be. The coastal town, when she finally arrived, was a muted symphony of gulls and sea salt, a stark contrast to the manicured perfection of her former life. She found a cheap motel, paid in cash, and for the first time in days allowed herself to truly breathe. The fear was a constant companion, but it was now laced with a burgeoning sense of liberation. James would undoubtedly discover her absence. The journal entries, the careful planning, the chilling precision of his actions, it all pointed to a man who would not let go easily. But she was gone. She was free. The mark on her hand, once a source of terror, began to transform in her mind. It was still there, an undeniable physical presence, a subtle discoloration that subtly altered her skin's texture. But it no longer felt like a brand of ownership. Instead, it became a scar, a battle wound from a war she hadn't known she was fighting. It was a reminder of her incredible resilience, the strength she had found within herself to confront unimaginable betrayal and to fight for her own existence. It was a testament to the fact that even when placed under the most insidious form of control, the human spirit could rebel, could break free. Lena started her new life with quiet dignity. She found a job at a small independent bookstore, the scent of old paper and new stories a soothing balm to her wounded spirit. She adopted a new routine, embraced anonymity, and slowly, painstakingly, began to rebuild. The fear of James's retaliation, of him finding her, never entirely dissipated. It lingered at the edges of her consciousness, a shadow she learned to live with, a constant vigilance that kept her sharp and aware of her surroundings. She knew that complete closure might be a luxury she could never afford, but she had something far more precious: her autonomy. Her past was a tapestry of stark contrast, the blinding light of a perfect wedding day juxtaposed with the creeping shadow of a husband's monstrous secret. The journey from blissful ignorance to terrifying enlightenment had been arduous, but it had stripped away her naivete and revealed an inner fortitude she never knew she possessed. The wedding portrait, once a symbol of idyllic happiness, now served as a powerful, unsettling reminder that appearances can be deceiving, that beneath the most beautiful surface, darkness can fester. And sometimes it takes a hidden detail, a subtle anomaly to crack open the illusion and reveal the chilling truth. This story, like so many others, reminds us that even in the most picture-perfect moments, secrets can hide in plain sight, waiting for a persistent eye to uncover them. It speaks to the courage it takes to look beyond the veneer, to trust your instincts, and to fight for your truth. If you've ever felt that unsettling flicker of doubt, that whisper that something is wrong even when everything seems right, then perhaps you understand Lena's journey. Share your own stories of hidden truths, of moments when the curtain was pulled back on a shocking reality. Your experiences resonate, and your resilience inspires. And if you're hungry for more narratives that explore the unsettling depths of human nature, where perfection often masks profound secrets, then make sure to subscribe. We'll continue to peel back the layers, one unsettling detail at a time, exploring the mysteries that lurk just beneath the surface of everyday life. Perhaps like Lena, we might just discover that the greatest strength lies in seeing what others choose to ignore.